So if you've been told that you have an autoimmune disease, or maybe you suspect one, and you've repeatedly been advised that your labs were normal, deep down, you know that something is going on, then this video is for you. My name is Dr. Seth Osgood. I am a board-certified family nurse practitioner with advanced training in functional medicine through the Institute for Functional Medicine. Autoimmune disease rarely starts where you think it does. And one of the biggest misunderstandings is around something called leaky gut. The truth is your gut is actually supposed to be a little bit leaky or permeable. If it wasn't, you'd be dead. That is just a fact. The problem isn't the fact that your gut is permeable, it's when that system loses regulation. And understanding that differentiates how we think about autoimmune disease in its entirety. If your gut wasn't permeable, you wouldn't absorb things that are important to life, like amino acids, fatty acids, vitamins, minerals, none of it. You'd become malnourished, your immune system would collapse, and you wouldn't survive. That's not controversial, that's just simple physiology. So the problem isn't gut permeability, the problem is excessive, chronic, poorly regulated intestinal permeability. And that distinction is where almost every conversation about autoimmune disease goes off the rails. Now, here's what I see over and over again in the clinic at Grassroots. People don't show up one day with an autoimmune disease out of nowhere. They show up after years of symptoms first. People will have fatigue that doesn't make any sense. Maybe their joints ache for no apparent reason. Brain fog no one can explain, digestive issues that get worse and worse over time, food sensitivities that seem to multiply over the years. And they're told the same thing repeatedly. Your labs are normal, nothing definitive is showing up. Let's just keep an eye on it and see if things get worse. And by the time an autoimmune diagnosis finally appears, the immune system has often been dysregulated for years on end, sometimes 5 years, 10 years, up to 15 years. So here's the question most people never get asked. What if autoimmune disease doesn't actually start in the immune system? What if it starts earlier at the interface between the environment and the immune system? And what if that interface is actually your gut? Now, to understand why this matters, we need to clear up a big misconception. The gut, it's not a brick wall. Your intestinal lining is a single layer of epithelial cells, one cell thick, covering the surface area about the size of a tennis court. Yes, I'll say it again, the surface area is about the size of a tennis court. Those cells are held together by structures called tight junctions, and underneath these tight junctions is a framework that can literally pull the cells closer together or farther apart. This system is designed to open and close dynamically. A better analogy than a wall is airport security. Airport security opens temporarily, checks on what's coming through, and then closes again. Security that never opens shuts the system down. Security that stays open all the time lets dangerous things through unchecked. Excessive intestinal permeability is what happens when the gates stop closing. Now, one of the main regulators of this is a protein you may have heard of. It's called zonulin. Zonulin controls how these things open up or close, and it's necessary. But when zonulin signaling becomes chronic, those tight junctions stay open a lot longer than they're supposed to. Here's a key point that surprises a lot of people. Gluten, specifically the gliadin in gluten, actually will increase zonulin release in everybody, all humans, not just people with celiac disease. That doesn't mean that gluten is evil. That doesn't mean that everyone needs to avoid it forever. It means that gluten is a biological signal that can influence gut barrier regulation. In celiac disease, this response is extreme. In non-celiac disease, it's not as extreme, but it's still a problem and is still very measurable. Chronic zonulin activation has also been linked to increased permeability of the blood-brain barrier, which helps explain why gut issues so often overlap with brain fog, headaches, mood changes, and autoimmune fatigue. Now let's talk about what actually causes immune activation, because this is where things get very concrete. One of the most important players here is a thing called lipopolysaccharides, or LPS. LPS is an endotoxin found on certain gut bacteria. It's one of the most potent immune activators that we know of. Now, under healthy conditions, this LPS will actually stay in the gut, and that's where it belongs. But when permeability increases, tight junctions loosen, the underlying structure contracts, cells pull apart, and then boom, LPS enters the bloodstream. Once this happens, the immune system lights up like a Christmas tree. LPS activates a receptor called toll-like receptor 4, setting off a cascade of inflammatory cytokines like TNF-alpha and interleukin-6. You've probably heard of these because they're plastered all over TV commercials these days. These are the very cytokines. The newest blockbuster drugs are designed to suppress in an attempt to shut down chronic inflammation. And sure, they can work, but they also come with a laundry list of side effects. You know the ones I'm talking about, the rapid fire warnings whispered at the end of the commercial that somehow managed to scare you half to death in under 15 seconds, all while something pleasant is playing in the background. Anyway, when LPS enters the bloodstream, this process is known as metabolic endotoxemia, and it has been linked to a variety of problems: insulin resistance, chronic pain, fatigue, neuroinflammation, and autoimmune activation. Here's the reframe that changes how you look at autoimmune disease. Many autoimmune patients are not overreacting. The immune system is responding appropriately to an exposure that should never be there in the first place. Now let's talk about food, because this is where people get off track and misled. When the gut barrier is excessively permeable, it is not just bacteria or toxins crossing that barrier. Intact food proteins will cross that barrier as well. The immune system doesn't see those as food. It actually sees them as a foreign invader. So antibodies form and immune memory develops to these food antigens. This is why I'll often see food sensitivity panels that are positive. The entire test will be positive. And that's not because somebody has suddenly developed a food sensitivity or intolerance to their entire diet. It's because the barrier is the problem. The food is not the problem. If we heal the barrier and we calm the immune system, many of these food reactions resolve. We see it all the time. This is also where molecular mimicry comes into play. Molecular mimicry happens when foreign proteins resemble human tissue so closely that the immune system actually gets confused. But molecular mimicry alone doesn't cause autoimmune disease. You need 4 things together: excessive intestinal permeability, repeat antigen exposure, chronic inflammatory signaling, often driven by LPS, and loss of immune tolerance. Autoimmune disease isn't sudden. It's trained quietly over an extended period of time. And that training largely happens in the gut. About 70% of the immune system lives in the gut-associated lymphoid tissue. Every meal is an immune event. Every microbial shift retrains immune responses. When oral tolerance breaks down, regulatory T cells decline and inflammatory pathways dominate. That's a hallmark sign of autoimmune disease. This is why labs can look normal for years while symptoms quietly progress. The immune system doesn't flip a switch, it rehearses. Now here's where a lot of gut protocols go wrong. Leaky gut is almost never the root cause. It's usually a secondary problem. Infections like SIBO or dysbiosis, maybe chronic stressors and cortisol dysregulation, hormonal imbalances, mold and environmental toxins, trauma and nervous system dysregulation. All of these things will contribute to leaky gut. If you don't address why the gut became permeable, repair will be temporary. You can rebuild the floor, but if the pipe is still leaking, the damage comes back. And yes, supplements like glutamine or butyrate, zinc carnosine, licorice, and colostrum, all of these things can support healing, and they're very useful tools in the right time, but they don't remove upstream drivers. And yes, Peptides like BPC 157, KPV, lorazepam can all be remarkable when they're used correctly, but these are biologically active compounds and they should be used under the care of a clinician, not ordered from some sketchy website. This is a medicine. This is not DIY biohacking. That's important for you guys to remember. So how do we actually figure out what is driving all of this? Well, the answer is testing. Excessive intestinal permeability does not show up on routine blood work. That's why we look at patterns across many tests: comprehensive stool analysis, SIBO breath test, food sensitivity testing. We'll look at mycotoxin panels, cortisol and hormone panels, everything to evaluate physiology. And sometimes we'll even look at leaky gut markers. But no single test gives us all of the answers. Patterns do. Now, before I wrap this up, I want to be clear about where I'm coming from on this. My name is Dr. Seth Osgood. I am a board certified family nurse practitioner with advanced training in functional medicine through the Institute for Functional Medicine. I almost work exclusively with people with gut issues and chronic inflammation and autoimmune issues, and I love what I do. This isn't theory for me. This is pattern recognition built from years of working with real patients, real labs, and very real outcomes. And that's why I take gut permeability and leaky gut seriously. It's not a buzzword. It really does matter because it's an early warning sign of the immune system telling us that something upstream needs attention. And here's the takeaway I really want you to remember from this talk. Autoimmune disease is not your body randomly attacking itself. It's your immune system responding to signals it was never meant to encounter. Often signals that come through the gut, through a barrier that has lost its ability to regulate itself. If the gut is the ignition switch, testing is how we find the spark before the fire spreads. And this is something I encourage everybody to do. If you want to learn more, one of the things we've done is we've built what's called the Knowledge Hub. And this is where we break down clearly the science behind everything we're talking about without a lot of hype. It's just information. And if you really need a more comprehensive clinician guided approach, our team at Grassroots Functional Medicine would love to work with you. We have discovery call process that you can go through to learn more about our practice so we can learn more about you to make sure you're a good fit. It's about helping you understand what's going on. That's where you get clarity. That's where you get resolution. And that's where you get lasting results. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you found this useful. Hope you have a blessed day. Thanks, guys.